Hello, welcome to When the Smoke Clears. I am the recovery plug. How's it going, man? I hope you guys are doing good today. I know my day is going pretty good, man. You know what I mean? Despite, a little bit of a rough week. Anyway, thank you for joining the video podcast today. I really appreciate that. I couldn't be doing this without anybody watching it, right? So thank you very much for that. I guess, before we get this video started, man, if you would please join me in a moment of silence followed by a serenity prayer for the addict who still suffers, and for those of us who are still bound to some sort of struggle that keeps us from moving forward in that toxic life that we live in, man. So yeah, if you would please join me in a moment of silence. God, grant me serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, wisdom to know the difference. All righty, well, check this out, man. I wanted to talk to you guys today about something about the subject that pertains to death and grief and addiction all combined into one, and how it's hard sometimes for and how people deal with that, and because that's something that that my family is going through this in this past week. So I'm not going to get into any details, but dealing with the death, dealing with loss is such a hard thing to do, and so I wanted to talk about that today, in case because I believe people need to hear how people deal with that kind of stuff, especially people who are dealing with other things like the addictions or depressions or suicidal thoughts or trauma. Any of that kind of stuff can have a big impact when you have to deal with grief and death and that sort of thing. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to share a chapter with you guys from my book that I read, and it just reminded me when I was thinking about what I wanted to share with you guys today, and I figured it was going to be that. What really stuck out was this chapter that I read in a book, and this book was written by the Dalai Lama, the 14th Dalai Lama, and Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and with co-writing with Douglas Abrams. And the book is called The Book of Joy, and it's this book right here. There you go, that book right there, The Book of Joy. And in this book, there is a chapter in here that talks about sadness, grief, and the hard times. And it's titled, I'll just let you know what it's titled. Let me put these glasses on so I can, read this thing. And let's see. This thing is titled Sadness and Grief, the Hard Times Knit Us More Closely Together. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you the chapter, and then we'll go from there. You know what I mean? I'll kind of elaborate my thoughts on it, and maybe I'll pause a few times here and there during the reading. But so let me get to the reading again. The chapter is titled Sadness and Grief, the Hard Times Knit Us More Closely Together, and it goes like this. It says, the first day of the Truth of Reconciliation Commission, the Archbishop began when one of these witnesses came to tell us about his experience at the end of a long and grueling day, and he was trying to tell us how they had tortured him. Then there was a point in trying to recall what they had done to him that he found it difficult to speak. He had now developed a speech impediment. I don't know what it was, the recalling on the speech impediment, but the witness was not able to go on, and he started to a sentence and then put his hands on his eyes and started weeping, and I joined him. At the end of it, I said to my colleagues, I told you I'm not fit to be chairing this. And lo and behold, I was right. I've made a public spectacle of myself. I'm a crybaby. I cry easily. I suppose I love easily too. Goes on to say, and so I think we shouldn't think we are super women or super men. To hold down emotions is in a controlled environment as in were it's not wise. I would say go ahead and even maybe shout out your sadness and pain. This can bring you back to the normal. It's locking them up and pretending that they are not there that causes them to fester and become a wound. I've not read this in a book. It's just how I handle them. Sadness is seemingly the most direct challenge to joy, but as Archbishop argued strongly, it often leads us most directly to empathy and compassion and to recognizing our need for one another. Sadness is a very powerful and enduring emotion. In one study, it was found that sadness lasted many times longer than more feeling emotions like fear or anger. Fear lasted on an average of 30 minutes. Sadness often lasted up to 120 hours or almost 5 days, while evolutionary value of our fight, anger, and flight fear response and clear the value of sadness seems harder to understand. New studies conducted by psychology researcher Joseph Forgrass show that mild sadness can actually have similar benefits that could reflect its value. In his experiment, people who were in a sad mood had better judgment and memory and were more motivated, more sensitive to social norms, and more generous than the happier controlled group. People who are in so-called negative states of sadness were more discerning about their situation, better able to remember details, and more motivated to change their situation. Which is particularly interesting is that brief sadness might generate more empathy or generosity. Participants in the study played some part of which involved deciding how much money to give themselves or how much money to give others. The sad participants gave significantly more than the other participants. While depression certainly collapsed our circle of concerns inward, the periodic feeling of sadness might widen it. Forgrass concluded that sadness may benefit in our lives, which may be why people are drawn to music, art, and literature that makes them feel sad. He urges us to embrace all of our emotions because they no doubt play a necessary role in our lives. Sadness, in many ways, the emotion that causes us to reach out to one another in support of solidarity. The Archbishop expressed it quite wonderfully when he explained, we don't really get close to others, and our relationship is made up of unending hunky-doriness. It is the hard times, the painful times, the sadness and the grief that knit us more closely together. A funeral is perhaps the most obvious example of weaving our relationship and community together, but even tears are a signal to others that we need comfort and kindness, that we are vulnerable and need help. We try so hard to separate joy and sorrow into their own boxes, but the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama tell us that they are inevitably fastened together. Neither advocate the kind of fleeting happiness often called hedonic happiness that required only positive states and banishes feeling like sadness to emotional exile. The kind of happiness that described is often called eudonic happiness and is characterized by self-understanding, meaning growth and acceptance, including life's inevitable suffering, sadness, and grief. I often receive questions, the Dalai Lama said, from those dear friends or parents or even a child passed away. They ask me, what should I do? I share with them from my own experience. My beloved main teacher who gave me my monk's ordination died, and I was grief-stricken. While he was alive, I always felt like he was a solid rock behind me that I could lean on. I felt very, very sad and full of grief when he passed away. The way through the sadness and grief comes from great loss is to use it as motivation and to generate a deeper sense of purpose. When my teacher passed away, I used to think that now I have even more responsibility to fulfill his wishes. So my sadness transcended into more enthusiasm, more determination. I have told those who had lost their dear friend or family member, it is very sad, but this sadness should translate into more determination to fulfill their wishes. If the one you have lost could see you and you are determined to and full of hope, they would be happy. With the great sadness of the loss, one can live an even more meaningful life. Sadness and grief are, of course, natural human responses to loss, but in your focus remains on the loved one you have just lost, the experience is less likely to lead to despair. In contrast, if your focus while grieving remains mostly on yourself, what am I going to do now, or how can I cope? Then there is a greater danger of going down the path of despair and depression. So again, so much depends on how we respond to our experience of loss and sadness. The Dalai Lama mentioned the famous Buddhist story of the woman who had lost her child and was inconsolable in her grief, carrying her dead child throughout the land, begging for someone to help her child or to heal her child. When she came to the Buddha, she begged him to help her. He told her he could help her if she would collect mustard seeds for the medicine. She eagerly agreed. But then the Buddha explained that the mustard seed needed to come from a house that had not been touched by death. When the woman visited each house in search of the mustard seed that might heal her son, she discovered that there was no house that had not suffered the loss of a parent or spouse or child. Seeing that her suffering was not unique, she was able to bury her child in the forest and release her grief. My friend Gordon Wheeler, who is a psychologist, explains that grief is a reminder of the death of our love. Without love, there is no grief. So when we feel our grief, uncomfortable and aching as it may be, it is actually a reminder of the beauty of that love now lost. I'll never forget calling Gordon while I was traveling and hearing him say that he was out to dinner by himself after the loss of a dear friend, so he could feel his grief. He knew that in the blinking and buzzing world of our lives, it is so easy to delete the past and move on to the next moment. The lingering in the longing, the loss and yearning is a way of feeling the rich and embroidered treasure of life, the torn cloth of our world that is endlessly being ripped and rewoven. And that is the chapter. That's a great chapter, man. I really, when I read that chapter, I was like, wow, man, it really resonated with me in that subject of grief and death and recovery and how to deal with that. And they make a very good statement in there that if you focus on the dear loved one that passed, is a whole lot more healthier than focusing on yourself. Because a lot of us, I know I've been guilty of this, it's like, how am I going to move on? How am I going to deal with this now? I remember when one of my uncles passed away, I was just so sad about it because he was my go-to guy. When things would get rough in my life, I could pick up the phone and call him for advice. You know what I mean? He was that guy for me. You know what I mean? And when he passed away, and I would go through troubles in my life, I didn't have anybody to call, anybody to talk to about it, and it just, I could understand how it whirlwinds you into this sadness and depression, and in turn there, it grows a stronghold that keeps you bound down. You know what I mean? So I am just grateful that I've been able to acquire a lot of wisdom from different people, from different literature that I read, that has helped me through my years of dealing with grief and sadness, and in turn that allows me to help somebody else who is dealing with that. You know what I mean? So I remember early in my earlier years when I dealt with death, I remember immediately going to the using. You know what I mean? If somebody died, then it was let's get drunk, let's get high, and remember them. You know what I mean? And now I don't have to do that. You know what I mean? Now I can help other people. You know what I'm saying? And I'm grateful for that because, you know, I know that my family needs me. You know what I'm saying? I know that they need me. They're going to need that advice, that wisdom from somebody. And I'm glad that I could be that. You know what I'm saying? And not only me and my family, but anybody else that I come in contact with, you know, through my peer support groups, through the rooms of AA or NA or just, you know, whatever peer support groups that are in communities I involve myself in, I could share that, and even like this, you know, sharing it here on this channel, it could possibly help somebody. You know what I mean? And to target that, it's going to be, how am I going to maneuver my mindset with this suffering? You know what I'm saying? And then if you target it, like I said, towards the loved one, and do something that you think that they would be appreciated of, and because they obviously, I don't believe that anybody would want you to be suffering. You know what I'm saying? So I believe that's why sometimes I know that I've been, you know, there when a couple of people that I know were passing away, and able to hear last words. You know what I mean? And it's funny because when somebody's lying there on their deathbed and they're trying to share these last words with you, they're showing compassion for you. You know what I'm saying? They're not worried about them. They're worried about you. They're telling you, they're trying to reassure you that, hey man, you know what, it's gonna be okay. You know what I mean? I want you to go, I want you to do this, I want you to do that, and they're throwing last requests in, you know what I'm saying? So that you can be better, you know what I mean? And I think that's beautiful. But I just really enjoyed that chapter because it really resonated me for the things that I'm going through this week with my family and stuff like that. So I figured that somebody needed to hear that out there somewhere, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, that could be you know, grief and death can be also, it's very dangerous for people in recovery because it is a trigger, you know what I mean? So you really have to make sure that you stay open-minded and willing to the help, you know what I'm saying? And stay connected to people, because ultimately that's how you're going to survive that suffering and that turmoil. And just know that it's just that we live in this life of seasons, and where there's suffering, there also will be joy. You know what I mean? And so there's two sides of that coin. You know what I'm saying? And you know, just if you can just, all you have to do is withstand that storm, and in time, you know, your heart and your soul mends, and you don't forget, but you'll be able to move on and moving on with the help of a community, of family and friends and that sort of thing is a whole lot easier. The road is a whole lot smoother than doing it alone, because when you're isolation can be a very dangerous thing. So just remember that. And but anyway, I just wanted to share that with you guys today because of my whole week and stuff like that. And yeah, so you know, again, if you guys could just, you know, pray for my family, and I really appreciate that so much. And the more prayer, the better, right? So I guess that's gonna be it for today's video, man. And thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate it. But if you would please at this time hit that bell, give me a thumbs up, shoot me a comment. Yeah, just know that when you do hit that subscribe button, it didn't cost you a thing, man. It don't cost you a thing at all. But you know what? You will be helping out another veteran, another homeless person, another person dealing with PTSD, childhood traumatic experience, trauma, suicidal thoughts, depression, anger issues, grief, sadness, all those types of things, my friends, because I have dealt with all those things at one point in time in my life. And guess what, my brothers and sisters? I know a way out, and my way out could be your way out. So I guess until the next time on When the Smoke Clears, I am the Recovery Club.